My name is Vera Fielding, and I was 33 years old when I learned that a locked door can tell you everything you need to know about your own family. It was a Saturday in June, one of those beautiful early summer afternoons when the light sits warm and golden on everything. At 2:30, I pulled my car into the long driveway of the Hadley estate, wearing a dress I had saved 11 months to buy and holding a bunch of white peonies I had chosen because they were my mother's favorite flower. I was early, the way I always am. And the moment I turned into that parking lot and saw the chains on the front doors and every window dark and still, something in my chest went very quiet. A groundskeeper was hosing down the stone steps nearby, moving slowly, like a man with nowhere to be. I rolled down my window and told him there was a wedding scheduled there at 4 o'clock. He didn't look up right away. He just said, "No, ma'am, that event was canceled 3 days ago." I sat in my car for a moment with the peonies in my lap and 46 unread text messages on my phone. Not one of them was from my mother-in-law, Diane Brennan. She was the woman whose name was on the contract for this venue. She was the woman who had insisted on handling everything herself. To understand why I wasn't afraid in that moment, you need to understand where I came from and what I had built, one ordinary day at a time. I grew up in a small 2-bedroom rental in Poughkeepsie. My mother worked double shifts at a diner, coming home with sore feet and a tired smile that she always managed to find for me. My father, Wade, was a man of endless schemes and very little follow-through. He sold house, siding 1 year, and invested in a vending machine business the next. Nothing ever stuck, except his drinking. I was the first person in my family to be accepted to a 4-year college, and I remember how proud that made me feel. Like I was standing at the beginning of something large and bright. I lasted 3 semesters. That February, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The hospital bills arrived faster than any financial aid could cover, and the choice became simple in a way that only genuinely hard choices can be. I left school, picked up 2 part-time jobs, and spent the next 8 months sitting beside my mother in a hospital room that always smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. I held her hand as much as I could. She died 12 days after I turned 20, and I never went back to finish my degree. What I did instead was find work helping to set up corporate events for a large company at $14.50 an hour. I was always the first one to the door in the morning and the last one to leave at night. Something about the chaos of a big event always made my mind go calm and focused, like a lens clicking into place. Within 2 years, I was coordinating major business conferences. Within 5, I was managing staff across an entire region. By 30, I was a director at a company called Ridgeline Hospitality, overseeing 11 event venues. I had no degree on my wall. What I had was a green binder, scuffed and overstuffed, that I carried to every meeting and every emergency. My team called it the playbook. My future mother-in-law would eventually call it something considerably less kind. I met Daniel Brennan while I was working on a project at one of our properties. He was an architect, tall and unhurried, the kind of man who asked your opinion and then actually listened to the answer. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. In all that time, he never once made me feel like my missing diploma was something I should be ashamed of. His family, however, felt very differently. The Brennans had old money, the quiet kind that expresses itself in hospital wing donations rather than flashy cars. Diane, Daniel's mother, held a position of considerable importance in the local social clubs. His father, Roger, played golf with people who made decisions. His sister, Brooke, documented her carefully curated life online for a large and admiring audience. At our engagement dinner, I arrived carrying my green binder because I had come straight from the office. Diane spotted it immediately and said, loudly enough for the table to hear, "Oh, is that your little homework folder?" I smiled and slid it under my chair. Later that evening, I overheard her tell someone, "She plans parties. She doesn't belong at one." It stung the way a small splinter stings, sharp and then dull, but I went back to the table, laughed at the right moments, and held Daniel's hand. I decided I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to be myself. My father fell in love with the Brennans almost immediately. Roger gave him a small job managing some rental properties. for $100 a week, and for the first time in years, Wade started wearing press shirts and carrying himself like a man of consequence. He began relaying Diane's opinions to me on a regular basis. She didn't like my flower choices. She thought my menu selections were too casual. When I called to share the news of a significant promotion at work, he paused and told me I really ought to go back and finish my degree. Nobody takes a party planner seriously, he said. Then he added, as if he'd been saving it, "You never finished anything, Vera. Why would today be different?" I didn't argue. I had 62 pallets of supplies arriving at a festival site, and no time to fall apart over a phone call. 3 months before the wedding, Diane offered to pay for the Hadley estate as a gift to us. She said she wanted to handle the logistics, so that I could simply be the bride for once. Daniel thought it was generous. I thought it was helpful. The deposit was $18,000. I wrote Diane a check for $9,000, our half, and she said she would cover the rest. The contract went into her name. All venue correspondence was routed to her email. When I asked to be copied on communications, she laughed lightly and told me I needed to learn how to take a break from working. I trusted her. I understood venue contracts better than most people alive, having read hundreds of them for my job. But I told myself that a contract was a contract and that family was family. What I didn't fully account for was that by letting her sign the paperwork, I had handed her all of the power. 2 weeks before the wedding, Diane arranged a golf trip for the men. She said Daniel needed to decompress. While he was away, I tried to contact the venue to confirm final details and was told that all communications had to go through Diane. I texted her. She replied immediately that everything was perfectly fine and that I was worrying for nothing. She gave me exactly the answer I needed to hear to make me stop asking questions. And it worked. I went back to my binder and my work and told myself I was being paranoid. 3 days before the wedding, I noticed the venue hadn't sent the final event schedule, the detailed packet that every professional venue sends as a matter of course. I mentioned it to Daniel. He said his mother was probably just busy. I wanted to believe him. Silence in my line of work almost always means someone has made a decision without telling you, but I went to bed instead of following my instincts. That was the one moment I would do differently. On the morning of my wedding, I woke up early, did my hair, and put on my simple white dress. My friend Claire came over with champagne and told me I looked beautiful. My peonies arrived and they were perfect. I felt genuinely ready. When my father came to collect me, wearing a suit that Roger had almost certainly paid for, I told Claire I wanted to swing by the venue early, just to see it. If you have ever had the particular feeling that something is wrong, before you have any concrete proof, you know exactly how I felt during that drive. The parking lot was empty. The doors were chained. A notice was posted on the gate. I called the venue office and a man confirmed that Diane Brennan had phoned 3 days ago to cancel the event. She had received a full refund of $14,000. $9,000 of that was my money. I asked him to send written confirmation to my email, and he did. I did not cry. I did not call Daniel. I went into the mode I have been in 100 times before when something goes wrong at scale, and I started working the problem. I called my assistant, Garrett, and told him we needed to relocate a 200-person wedding to a new venue within 90 minutes. I called a woman named Carol, who owns a property nearby called Lark's Barn. I had helped her out of a difficult situation years earlier, and she picked up on the second ring. She said yes before I had finished explaining. Garrett began calling every vendor simultaneously. The caterers, the florists, the musicians, the photographers. Everyone needed a new address and a new timeline. We ran it like a field operation, calm and fast and clear. The hardest piece was the guests, 200 people already en route to the wrong location. We built a phone tree and worked through the entire list, giving everyone the updated address and telling them to arrive at 4 as originally planned. We did not sound panicked, because we were not panicked. We were working. While this was happening, my father showed up at the Hadley estate and saw the chains on the doors. I had expected him to be furious on my behalf. Instead, he told me to let Diane sort it out. He said I should be grateful for everything the Brennans had done. He said again, the thing about never finishing anything. Standing there in the parking lot on my wedding day, holding my phone and my binder, I understood clearly and finally that my father was not on my side, and perhaps never had been. I also noticed, when I scrolled back to the family group chat, messages I had missed from earlier in the week. Diane and Brooke had been discussing the cancellation with something close to amusement. Diane had written that she wanted to watch me fall apart. She had quietly arranged an alternative gathering of 30 people at her private club, a small, controlled event where she would be at the center of everything. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I had also, earlier that morning, called a friend who works in local news. She brought a camera crew. By 3 o'clock, Lark's barn was being transformed. My team moved with the kind of precision that only comes from years of doing this work under pressure. Chairs were set in rows, flowers arranged, the sound system tested. It wasn't the Hadley estate. It was warmer and more honest, full of light coming through the old wooden walls, and it felt more like us than any grand estate ever would have. When Diane and her family arrived and saw the cars already filling the field outside the barn, they understood that the moment had passed them by. They came inside and took seats in the back. My father sat among them, looking diminished somehow inside his borrowed suit. Before Daniel and I exchanged our vows, I stood and spoke to everyone in that room. I told them what had happened plainly and showed them the confirmation email from the venue. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because 200 people had driven to a locked building on my wedding day, and they deserved to know why. I also looked at my father when I spoke, and I told him, and everyone else who needed to hear it, that I had finished this. I had built a career without any of the advantages people said you needed. I had moved a wedding across town in 90 minutes with a phone, a binder, and 13 years of hard-earned relationships. I was not the girl who never finished anything. Daniel and I got married in that barn as the afternoon light came through the rafters. The food was good and the music was loud, and everyone who had shown up for us danced. The news segment aired a few days later, and the story spread quickly through the community. Diane quietly resigned from her club memberships not long after. We have not spoken to that side of the family in 5 months, and I find that I am at peace with that. My green binder still sits on my desk at work. It is even more scuffed now than it was before. My team still calls it the playbook. To me, it represents something simple. That expertise is built through showing up day after day and doing the work whether or not anyone is watching or impressed. No one gave me a head start. No one opened a door and waved me through. I learned by doing, and I kept going when it was hard, and that turned out to be enough. If someone in your life is making you feel like you are less than you are because of what you don't have on paper, or where you come from, or what you haven't finished, I want you to remember this. The moment they move against you is the moment you find out exactly how much you have built, and you may surprise yourself with the answer.